Hello, my name is Teresa Woodruff, and I'm here to talk to you about students with a disability in reading. Our classrooms will be made up of children with various learning styles and abilities. Of the skills a student will acquire in the classroom, reading is the most important. It is needed in all areas of their lives. They need it to gain knowledge and understanding of the world around them. The problem arises when a student has a reading disability. They not only struggle to gain the knowledge from the classroom, but reading is difficult, tiring, and requires hard work and a continuous effort. As an effective teacher, you'll need to understand what a reading disability is, the factors that cause it, what it looks like, how to evaluate it, and have tools to help a student succeed in reading. This knowledge that I share with you today will help you to get guidance to a struggling reader and help them to succeed. The National Institute of Neurological Disorders and Stroke defines a reading disability as a learning disability that specifically impairs a person's ability to read. You need to make sure you don't confuse a reading disability with a reading difficulty. Some students may just take a little longer to learn a new skill. They may have had poor instruction and just need more reading instruction, where a reading disability needs special education services. Researchers have developed many different theories that try to explain what causes reading disabilities. One theory is visual problems. A student can lack visual acuity or have eye-teaming problems. These types of visual problems can be a contributing factor, but visual acuity can be fixed with eyeglasses, and eye-teaming problems can be fixed with therapy. Auditory problems are another theory. If a student has an auditory problem, he'll not be able to distinguish the number of sounds in a word. The Learning Disabilities Association explains that auditory problems cause reading difficulties, but should not be confused with a disability. Auditory problems, along with visual problems, can be a contributing factor, but it's not a cause of a reading disability. Lateral dominance is another theory. This theory is based on the observation that everyone seems to have a dominant hand, leg, eye, or cerebral hemisphere. They seem to want to use one side of their body over the other. Dr. Paul Broca, a French physician, said that the language part of our brain was the opposite of the dominant side of the body parts a person uses. When one side of the brain does not become dominant, confusion arises, causing a student to see reversals. Dr. Barbara H. Connolly from the Department of Physical Therapy at the University of Tennessee's Center of Health Science did a study on 91 students with disabilities. Her results showed no difference in lateral dominant problems between those students with disabilities and those without. She concluded that she could not support this theory. As you can see, there is no clear picture as to what causes reading disabilities, but there has been consideration as to what factors may be involved. You will see a wide range of reading abilities in your classrooms. To help you make a better decision about how to guide the struggling reader, you'll need to understand what factors may be contributing to the student's difficulties. Environment and genetics have played a factor through the studies of families. Studies related to DNA have found reading disabilities and the inheritance of a gene linked together. Cognitive factors have played a role also. The ability to learn, the ability to pay attention, and memory are important to the reading process. Ability to learn affects the student's ability to become a successful reader. A reader with the ability to learn tends to exhibit age-appropriate sensory, perceptual, cognitive, and social skills as they progress through the preschool years. Memory gives the ability to encode, store, and retrieve information. Language can also be a factor in a reading disability. When a child has a delay in language development and trouble with phonetic awareness, they struggle to read. Culture and socioeconomic factors have placed students at a greater risk of having reading problems. Some students from other cultures may have a negative attitude toward reading if the material is presented in a competitive atmosphere and they come from a culture where learning is cooperative. A very important factor would be the instructional factors. How instruction is presented and climate of the room and availability of books all play a role in helping the student succeed in reading. If one or more of these contributing factors are present, the teacher needs to monitor the student as they progress to provide intervention early if needed. If you're working with students in a preschool classroom, you should look for signs that may suggest a reading disability. One sign may be seeing a student with a delay in a milestone of their development expected for students their age. These delays may be signals of a learning disability and, if caught early, may be easier to correct. You may see a student who has trouble interacting with his peers or trouble following directions or routines. They may talk later than other children. They may have trouble with rhyming words, vocabulary, and trouble learning their numbers, alphabet, and days of the week. Some students have trouble identifying shapes and colors. Another early warning sign that you may see is when a preschooler is consistently restless and he is easily distracted. If you are working with students in kindergarten through 4th grade, you may see a student struggling to learn the connection between letters and sounds. A student may have a consistent reading and spelling error, such as reversals, where they get the B and the D mixed up. You may see inversions, where the student sees a W as an M. Other troubles in reading are transpositions, where the reader mixes the letters around to make a word they know. Another is substitutions, where they substitute a word with the same meaning for the word they are reading. When a struggling reader gets into the 5th and 8th through 8th grade, they can become very resistant to reading. They'll not like the reading and writing and will try to avoid reading aloud. When they're writing, you will see them spell the same word differently within the assignment. Many times, they have poor organizational skills, trouble following classroom discussions, and expressing their thoughts out loud. Once you see a problem, you need to respond right away. Response to intervention is an approach to identify struggling learners. It starts with an assessment of the entire general education classroom. These students will show they are struggling. Those students that show they are struggling are provided interventions to increase their learning. You are the most important piece for this assessment. You need to perform a quality assessment for each student. This will give you information as to who the struggling learners are. If the student is at risk, you'll give the supplemental instruction during the school day in the classroom. The duration of this supplemental instruction should not go longer than 8 weeks. During this time, the student should be monitored closely, using a valid screening process. If at the end of the 9 weeks the student shows progress, they're sent back to class. If not, they advance to Tier 2. In Tier 2, the student is given instruction that fits their needs. The intervention varies from each student and is usually performed in a small group setting. During this time, they are monitored closely using a valid screening process, not taking longer than a grading period. If a student shows progress, they go back to the classroom. If not, they're considered to be moved to Tier 3. In Tier 3 at this level, students are given individualized intensive interventions that target the student's skill. If a student does not respond to this intervention, they're referred to a special ed service. Diagnosing is not an easy task. There's not an exact science of figuring it out. You'll not just use one test to determine the disability, and it will not be one person who determines it. The school will develop a team of professionals to put information together to make a decision. The student will take an intelligence test to see what their IQ is. Then the team will look at how the student did on the standardized tests as compared to other students their age. The instructional data collected during the RTI time, the IQ test, and the standardized test scores are brought before the team, and they are then able to make a diagnosis if there is a reading disability, and if so, how they're going to go about helping the student succeed. There are some accommodations and modifications you can do in your classroom to assist a struggling reader. You can use a tiered assignment with various degrees of complexities. You will still have the content of the curriculum, and the student will be working toward meeting the objectives, but the process or product being used will vary according to where the student is at their reading skills. I found an example from the Derry School District of a lesson using a character map. You would have the lower readers describe how the character looks, says, and acts. Your average level readers will go a little deeper and describe what the character says, means to say, goals, and what changes that what they may have went through. In your third level, you will have your higher readers go into more critical thinking and describe the clues the author gives about the character and why. A strategy for younger students it can be used is to set up a center that gives each student a learning experience. that is directed towards their specific need and interest. Within each center, a different activity can be prepared for each level of learner. An example I found in Reading Rockets was to focus on a specific reading skill in each center. The theme of interest can be the same, but the students can focus on different skills such as phonics or vocabulary. For older students, an example would be to develop interest groups with students who want to read the same book. When setting these groups up, the students that are struggling could have their book on tape, so they could listen to it instead of struggling to read. You can also adjust your regular daily activities to include all levels of learners. An example I found in the Springfield Public Schools was when you're writing your morning messages, you can leave a blank word for each of the different levels of readers. You would have a specific blank in the morning message for each targeted reading group. For the students working on a silent E, use a silent E in a blank space, a blank after a word that needs a suffix for those students working on endings, or a blank for a word with a consonant blend. Then choose a volunteer from each targeted group to come up and fill in the blanks. You could also develop a contract with your students. This agreement would state what the student will be expected to learn and what will be required during the assignment. The student will help decide what method to be used to help them complete the assignment. A contract strategy will help your student work at their own pace, independently and with their own learning style. An example where you can use this strategy in your classroom would be when doing a 5th grade book response. The struggling reader would choose from a list of activities they can use for their response and develop a contract with you. The contract would say when the student expects to be done with each stage of the development and when they will turn in the book response. Here are some evidence-based interventions you can use during your RTI process. Some are beneficial for the whole classroom. It is so exciting to see these being done and see the progress each student as they succeed. I have found that these are not a one-size-fits-all. You have to work with each student to see what fits. The first two interventions are interventions for fluency. Helps and Read Naturally. Helps is a free program with material and training online. Read Naturally offers an overview of the program and explains it online. Then you'll need to purchase that program. Both programs build fluency by having students practice reading a short story until they can read it at a predetermined goal rate. Once they reach that goal, they move on to the next story. Helps is a 2 to 3 10-minute session weekly. Read Naturally is 3 to 5 30-minute sessions weekly. When you have students needing intervention for reading and spelling, the Orton-Gillingham approach is a good one to have training in. The Orton-Gillingham approach was designed for students with problems associated with dyslexia. Now it is being used with all levels of education as an intervention for reading disabilities and difficulties. Each lesson is tailored for each student using drill cards, word lists, spelling, handwriting, dictation, reading, and instruction of spelling concepts. There is training available to use the program. They recommended students get 2 hours a week of teaching. Spooner and Shell Lake have been using this approach and have found it to be very effective. When you have students needing to increase comprehension, vocabulary, and fluency, Reading Rockets is a site that is a good resource for parents, teachers, and other educators in assisting struggling readers. The site gives lessons and activities to help readers to learn to read and to read better. The site has articles to educate and direct in written form and in video. Included are lesson plans and activity ideas. The site also has a chart helping the teacher choose the strategy that may fit their student. It gives the strategy, the age level, the tier level of intervention, and where you can find information on that particular strategy. When you want to increase a student's comprehension and reading skill, Read 180 is an intervention program for grades 3 through 12. It consists of a curriculum with instruction and assessment. The teacher gives instruction in a whole group or small group setting. The student then works on a computer independently, working through the different reading levels at their own pace. The student goes through 3 zones. 1, they must pass the comprehension and vocabulary quiz. 2, they must correctly spell a minimum of 6 to 24 words, depending on what level they're at. 3rd, the student then reads the passage aloud correctly. This program is very expensive, but has been very effective in our middle school here in Spooner. When you purchase the program, they do provide training. The key to success for each student is to access early and to apply interventions early to help the student have the best success in reading. The important factor we need to remember, you are not alone in the education of your students. You can have a significant impact on a struggling reader's ability to read, but it is a hard job to do it on your own. You need to get the school, families, and communities involved. There is no perfect solution to reading difficulties. You will need to assess each student individually and try different strategies until one works best for each student. Thank you.